Get off the stage, human. The guttural roar of laughter echoed across the colossal amphitheater, shaking the very ground beneath the warrior's boots. Drekka Prime, the galaxy's most feared gladiatorial arena, was alive with taunts, jeers, and the metallic clang of alien fists slamming against barriers. Subscribe now and join the adventure. Like, comment, and tell us. Could you survive the arena? Caleb Thorne didn't flinch. His bruised, sweat-streaked face stared back at the sea of alien spectators. Their twisted forms, clawed, scaled, multi-eyed, seemed to morph together in a chaotic swirl of disdain. He tightened his grip on the crude metal rod they'd tossed him as a weapon. It was little more than a rusty pipe, hardly a match for the serrated blades, energy whips, and plasma shields wielded by his towering opponents. A bone-rattling gong sounded. From the opposite gate, a behemoth emerged, a six-limbed colossite covered in spiked carapace, its mandibles clicking in anticipation. The crowd erupted, a cacophony of excitement and bloodlust. Caleb could feel the vibrations in his chest. He swallowed hard but refused to step back. Fear was an indulgence he couldn't afford. "Look at the ape," one voice jeered in universal common. "Barely evolved, and he thinks he can fight." Caleb's jaw tightened. The humiliation burned hotter than his cracked ribs or the searing cut on his thigh. This wasn't just a fight. It was a spectacle, a ritual of dominance. Humans were the new addition to the galactic fold, and the other species relished every opportunity to remind them of their inferiority. He had been dragged here from Earth under false promises of diplomacy. The intergalactic games, they called it. The pinnacle of alien sportsmanship. It was a trap. Humans were cannon fodder, brought in as novelty prey for alien predators. Caleb knew that now. He knew he'd been set up to fail, to be mocked, to die for their amusement. The colossite charged, each step reverberating through the arena floor. Caleb's mind snapped into focus. His military training kicked in, stripping away the fear, the shame, the noise of the crowd. Assess, anticipate, react. He sidestepped at the last possible moment, using the creature's momentum against it. The alien stumbled, its massive body crashing into the sand. The audience roared, some with laughter, others with surprise. Caleb didn't wait. He swung the metal rod with all his strength, aiming for the back of the creature's exposed head. The impact rang through his arms, but the creature barely flinched. The colossite spun, one of its massive arms swiping at Caleb like a freight train. He flew across the arena, landing hard on his back. Stars danced in his vision as the crowd erupted into laughter again. But as he lay there, gasping for air, something inside him shifted. This wasn't just about survival anymore. It wasn't about proving humanity's worth to these monsters. It wasn't even about revenge. It was about sending a message. Caleb pushed himself to his feet, his body screaming in protest. He spat blood onto the arena floor and glared at the colossite. "Come on then," he growled. His voice was low, raw, and guttural, more beast than man. The crowd fell silent for a moment, a ripple of uncertainty passing through them. The human wasn't supposed to fight back. He was supposed to die like all the others. Quickly, pitifully, forgettably. The colossite hesitated, its mandibles clicking nervously. It could sense the change in Caleb's stance, the shift in his energy. The human was no longer prey. Caleb charged this time, a blur of fury and desperation. He ducked under the alien's swinging arm and drove the metal rod into its throat with every ounce of strength he had left. The creature let out a strangled cry, its limbs flailing wildly. The crowd gasped. Blood, thick and green, poured from the colossite's wound as it collapsed to the ground, twitching. Caleb stood over the body, his chest heaving, his hands trembling. Silence. Then, a single voice broke through. "Beginner's luck," it sneered, but the unease in its tone was unmistakable. Caleb turned to the audience, his face a mask of defiance. He raised the bloodied rod high above his head and let out a primal roar, a sound that echoed through the arena, silencing the crowd once more. this wasn't the end. It was only the beginning. The colossite's lifeless body twitched one final time before going still, its bulk casting a long shadow over the crimson-stained sands. Caleb staggered back, his chest heaving, his battered body screaming for rest. The arena was silent now, save for the faint hum of the containment fields that kept the spectators safe. The smell of scorched metal and alien blood hung in the air, thick and acrid. Caleb's hands, trembling and slick with green ichor, tightened around the makeshift weapon. The silence didn't last. A slow, rhythmic clapping began from somewhere high in the stands. It was deliberate, mocking. Caleb's eyes flicked upward, where a lone figure sat apart from the masses in a throne-like chair of gleaming black alloy. The Overseer. Impressive, the Overseer's voice boomed, amplified by unseen technology. It was a strange, melodic tone that seemed to reverberate inside Caleb's skull. The human has spirit, after all. The crowd erupted into laughter again, though now it carried an edge of uncertainty. Caleb could see it in their many eyes, slitted, compound, glowing. This wasn't how the show was supposed to go. Humans were supposed to die, quickly and pitifully, reinforcing their inferiority. Caleb had shattered that narrative, and the cracks were spreading. Spirit won't save you, though, the Overseer continued, leaning forward. Its elongated face, pale and devoid of emotion, was framed by tendrils of shimmering fabric that seemed to move on their own. You'll fight again. You'll lose. And when you do, your death will be slow. The gates at the far end of the arena rumbled open. Two hulking figures stepped forward, their forms obscured by the haze of heat and sand. Caleb's heart sank. He could barely stand, let alone face fresh opponents. The first figure emerged, a towering Vrexian covered in overlapping plates of natural armor. Its forearms ended in jagged claws, and its eyes glowed faintly with an unsettling intelligence. Beside it, a serpentine-lit Hari slithered into view, its scaled body glinting under the harsh arena lights. It carried a long, flexible weapon that crackled with arcs of blue energy. The crowd roared their approval. Caleb wiped blood from his mouth, his mind racing. He couldn't win this, not like this. But he refused to die on their terms, not for their amusement. He glanced around the arena, searching for anything he could use. His eyes fell on the colossite's corpse. Its carapace was cracked open where his blow had landed, exposing a faintly glowing core embedded in its chest cavity. Energy core, power source, explosive potential. The lit Hari struck first, its weapon lashing out with blinding speed. Caleb barely dodged in time, the crackling whip grazing his side and sending a jolt of searing pain through his body. He stumbled but kept moving, forcing his battered legs to carry him toward the colossite's body. The Vrexian roared and charged, its claws slicing through the air. Caleb dove, rolling under its massive frame. His hands found purchase on the colossite's chest, fingers digging into the still warm flesh. He yanked at the glowing core, his muscles screaming with the effort. The Lithary's whip struck again, wrapping around Caleb's leg and pulling him off balance. He hit the ground hard, the core slipping from his grasp and rolling a few feet away. The Vrexian loomed over him, its claws raised for a killing blow. Adrenaline surged through Caleb's veins. He twisted his body, ignoring the pain, and grabbed a shard of the colossite's shattered carapace. As the Vrexian's claws descended, Caleb drove the shard upward into the alien's exposed underbelly. The creature let out a deafening roar, green blood gushing from the wound as it staggered backward. Caleb scrambled to his feet, the core now within reach. He grabbed it and turned to face the lit Hari, which hissed in fury and coiled its body, ready to strike. "Come on," Caleb growled, his voice raw and defiant. The lit Hari lunged, but Caleb was faster. He hurled the energy core with all his strength, aiming for the creature's open maw. The core connected, and for a brief moment, there was silence. Then, an explosion tore through the arena. The shockwave sent Caleb flying, his body slamming into the arena wall. He gasped for air, his vision blurred by smoke and fire. The lit Hari was gone, reduced to a charred smear on the sand. The Vrexian lay crumpled nearby, its massive body riddled with shrapnel. Caleb forced himself to stand, every movement a battle against the pain. He turned to face the Overseer, his eyes blazing with defiance. The crowd was silent once more, their disbelief palpable. For the first time, Caleb saw fear in their faces. The Overseer rose from its throne, its expression unreadable. "It seems," it said slowly, "we've underestimated you." Caleb didn't respond. He was done with their games. The gates rumbled open again, but this time it wasn't new opponents that emerged. It was a squad of armored guards, their weapons trained on Caleb. "Take him," the Overseer commanded, its voice colder now. "The games are over." Caleb didn't move. He stood his ground, his battered body radiating defiance. He had fought. He had survived. And he wasn't done yet. The guards advanced with mechanical precision, their footsteps synchronized, and their weapons glowing with an ominous hum. Caleb stood motionless, his breathing labored but his eyes unyielding. His mind raced as he scanned the arena for an escape, but the towering walls and force fields left no clear options. The Overseer's chilling gaze bore into him from above, its expression one of quiet amusement, as if it already knew how this would end. Caleb had been underestimated once. He wouldn't allow it again. The guards spread out, encircling him. Each carried a weapon he didn't recognize, cylindrical with flickering veins of energy along their sides. Their movements were calculated, and there was no hesitation in their approach. These weren't like the gladiators. They weren't here to entertain the crowd. They were here to end him. His eyes darted to the shattered remains of the Colossite, and the faint glint of a broken carapace, shard lying in the blood-soaked sand. He dropped to one knee, pretending to stagger as if his strength had finally given out. The nearest guard stepped forward, raising its weapon. In an instant, Caleb lunged. His hand closed around the shard, and he spun on the ground, sweeping the guard's legs out from under it. The alien toppled with a heavy crash, its weapon discharging a bolt of energy that streaked harmlessly into the air. Caleb didn't hesitate. He drove the jagged edge of the shard into the guard's neck, a spray of dark, viscous fluid splattering across his face. The crowd erupted into chaos, a cacophony of gasps, cheers, and screams. The other guards reacted swiftly, their weapons aimed and ready to fire, but Caleb was already moving. He grabbed the fallen guard's weapon and fired blindly, the recoil jarring his arms. A bolt struck one of the advancing guards square in the chest, sending it sprawling. He darted toward the nearest wall, zigzagging to avoid the blast that rained down around him. The air crackled with energy, the heat from each shot singeing his skin. His heart pounded as he reached the wall, pressing his back against the cold, unyielding surface. The guards closed in, their formation tightening. Above, the Overseer observed in silence, its elongated fingers steepled beneath its chin. Caleb glanced upward, catching a glimpse of the Overseer's expression, calm, calculating, almost curious. "Stand down, human," one of the guards barked in universal common, its voice harsh and distorted through its helmet. Caleb gritted his teeth. He wasn't going to let them take him, not without a fight. He raised a weapon, his finger tightening on the trigger. But before he could fire, a sudden tremor shook the arena. The sand shifted beneath his feet, and a low, mechanical hum filled the air. The crowd's jeers turned to murmurs of confusion as the source of the disturbance became clear. One of the arena gates, massive and heavily reinforced, began to open. A figure stepped through the thick haze of smoke and dust, its silhouette tall and imposing. Caleb's breath caught in his throat as the figure emerged fully into view. It was an alien unlike any he'd seen before, its body encased in sleek, black armor that glowed faintly with an eerie, pulsating light. The crowd fell silent, their collective attention fixed on the newcomer. The Overseer rose from its throne, its voice cutting through the tense silence. "Ah, the Arbiter has arrived." The name sent a ripple of unease through the crowd. Caleb could feel it, a shift in the energy of the arena, a palpable sense of dread. The Arbiter strode forward with deliberate grace, each step exuding authority. Its helmeted head turned slowly, taking in the scene. Caleb, bloodied and defiant. The fallen guards. The chaos in the stands. "You've caused quite a stir," the Arbiter said, its voice smooth and chillingly composed. It spoke directly to Caleb, ignoring the Overseer entirely. Caleb tightened his grip on the weapon, his body coiled like a spring. "If you're here to kill me, get in line." The Arbiter tilted its head, a gesture that might have been amusement or disdain. "Kill you? No, that would be premature." Before Caleb could respond, the Arbiter raised one armored hand. The air around it shimmered, and a wave of force slammed into him, pinning him against the wall. His weapon clattered to the ground as he struggled against the invisible pressure, his vision swimming from the sudden impact. "You've proven yourself resourceful," the Arbiter continued, its tone clinical. "But resourcefulness without direction is chaos. And chaos has no place in the arena." Caleb gasped for breath, his vision narrowing. He could feel the weight of the Arbiter's gaze, the unspoken threat in its words. But beneath the fear, a spark of defiance burned. "I'm not your puppet," he spat, his voice strained but unwavering. The Arbiter stepped closer, its towering form casting a shadow over him. "No," it said softly, "you're not. Yet." With a flick of its wrist, the force holding Caleb vanished. He crumpled to the ground, coughing and clutching his ribs. "Take him to the lower levels," the Arbiter commanded, addressing the guards. "He's to be prepared for the trials." The Overseer's voice cut through the tense silence, laced with thinly veiled irritation. "The trials? He's a human. He won't survive." The Arbiter turned its helmeted head toward the Overseer, the faint glow of its armor intensifying. "That remains to be seen." The guards moved quickly, seizing Caleb's arms and dragging him to his feet. He struggled weakly, his battered body unable to resist. As they hauled him toward the exit, the crowd erupted into a frenzied roar, their bloodlust reignited by the promise of new violence. Caleb's mind raced. The trials, whatever they were, he knew they wouldn't be fair. But as the gates closed behind him and the cacophony of the arena faded, one thought burned brighter than the rest. He wasn't done fighting. Not yet. The hallway was suffocatingly dim, lit only by narrow strips of flickering, greenish light embedded into the metallic walls. The guards marched Caleb forward, their grips ironclad, dragging him through a labyrinth of corridors that smelled of ozone and decay. His feet barely skimmed the ground, his legs too weak to support his weight after the ordeal in the arena. But his mind was alert, racing through fragments of what he'd heard. The trials. What could be worse than what he'd just survived? He didn't want to find out, but deep down he knew he wouldn't have a choice. The guard stopped abruptly at a reinforced door. One of them raised a gauntlet hand to a panel, and with a sharp hiss, the door slid open, revealing a stark chamber beyond. Caleb was unceremoniously shoved inside, landing hard on the floor. The door sealed behind him, and the chamber's lights flickered on, revealing his surroundings. It was a cell, though larger and more ominous than the ones he'd been confined to before. The walls were smooth, featureless metal, but embedded within them were countless small, glowing orbs that seemed to watch him, tracking his every movement. In the center of the room stood a single object, a pedestal holding a sleek, black device that looked like a cross between a helmet and a cage. Its surface shimmered faintly, pulsating as if alive. Caleb dragged himself to his feet, every muscle screaming in protest. He approached the pedestal cautiously, his instincts screaming danger. The device seemed to hum faintly, a low vibration that resonated in his chest. "I wouldn't touch that if I were you," a voice called out. Caleb spun around, his heart hammering. A figure was sitting in the corner of the cell, leaning casually against the wall. It was humanoid but clearly not human. Its skin was a deep shade of cobalt, its eyes a luminous silver that seemed to pierce right through him. A pair of ridges ran along the sides of its face, tapering into sharp points near its temples. "Who are you?" Caleb demanded, his voice hoarse. The figure smiled faintly, a wry expression that didn't quite reach its eyes. "Just another piece in the Overseer's twisted game. Name's Kaler, and you must be the human everyone's talking about." Caleb didn't relax, his fist clenching. "What's this?" he asked, gesturing to the device on the pedestal. Kaler's smile faded, replaced by a grim expression. "That," he said, "is your introduction to the trials." Before Caleb could respond, the lights in the cell dimmed and the hum from the device intensified. He took a step back as the pedestal began to rise, lifting the device until it hovered ominously at eye level. A voice echoed through the chamber, smooth and inescapable. "The Arbiter. Caleb," it said, "you have proven yourself capable in the arena, but strength alone is insufficient. The trials will test your resolve, your intellect, and your adaptability. You will face what others have not survived. Failure is not an option." The device surged forward, moving as if it had a will of its own. Caleb tried to dodge, but it latched onto his head, its interior lining molding to the shape of his skull. A sudden jolt of energy shot through him, and he cried out, his vision flooding with a kaleidoscope of colors. The cell dissolved around him, replaced by a dizzying void of shifting shapes and sounds. He was no longer in the chamber. He was nowhere. And yet, he felt as though he were falling, plummeting through an infinite expanse. "Don't fight it," Kaler's voice echoed faintly, as though from a great distance. "Let it take you, or you'll never get out." Caleb's instincts screamed against surrender, but he forced himself to breathe, to focus. The void began to stabilize, shapes coalescing into a semblance of reality. He was standing in a dense, alien jungle, the air thick with moisture and the scent of decaying vegetation. The trees were unlike anything on Earth, their massive trunks twisting unnaturally, their leaves glowing faintly in shades of blue and violet. Strange creatures skittered through the underbrush, their eyes reflecting the dim light like shards of glass. A low growl sounded behind him, deep and guttural. Caleb turned slowly, his heart pounding. It was a beast, easily the size of a small truck, its body covered in overlapping scales that shimmered like liquid metal. Its 6 eyes locked onto him, unblinking, and its jaws parted to reveal rows of jagged teeth. The trials had begun. Caleb scrambled backward as the beast lunged, its massive claws tearing through the undergrowth. He tripped over a root and fell hard, the breath knocked from his lungs. The creature loomed over him, its hot, rancid breath washing over his face. Without thinking, he grabbed a nearby branch, its surface slick and covered in thorn-like protrusions. As the beast struck, he drove the branch upward with all his strength, aiming for its throat. The creature let out a deafening roar, its blood, a glowing, viscous substance, spraying across Caleb's arms. It reared back, thrashing in pain, and Caleb scrambled to his feet, his mind racing. He had no weapons, no allies, and no idea what this place was. But he knew one thing. If he didn't figure it out fast, he wouldn't survive long enough to find out. The jungle faded away, dissolving into a swirl of light and shadow as the device on Caleb's head unleashed its next torment. He barely had time to catch his breath before he found himself thrust into a new landscape. This time, he was standing on the edge of a massive chasm, its depths shrouded in a swirling mist that seemed to whisper in a language he couldn't understand. The air was cold, biting against his skin, and the ground beneath his feet felt unervingly brittle. In the distance, a series of precarious stone platforms stretched across the void, each one glowing faintly with runes that shifted and twisted as he stared. The voice of the Arbiter echoed in his mind, disembodied and inescapable. The trial of precision. You must reach the other side. Be swift, or the void will claim you. As if on cue, the ground behind him began to crumble, chunks of it falling into the abyss. Caleb's instincts took over, and he leaped onto the first platform. It wobbled under his weight, the runes flaring brightly before dimming again. He didn't have time to analyze it. The platform was already sinking, and he had to keep moving. He jumped to the next one, then the next. Each leap a gamble as the mist seemed to rise, reaching for him with tendrils of cold and shadow. The platforms were uneven and increasingly unstable. Some spun wildly as soon as he landed, forcing him to adjust his footing mid-air. Others began to crack the moment his weight touched them, leaving no margin for hesitation. The runes offered no clues, their shifting patterns maddening in their complexity. Caleb's breath came in ragged gasps, his muscles burning with the effort. He wasn't just fighting gravity. He was fighting the sheer mental strain of keeping up with the relentless pace of the trial. As he reached the halfway point, the mist coalesced into shapes, spectral figures with hollow eyes and elongated limbs. They moved toward him with a slow, deliberate grace, their forms flickering like static. "No, no, no," he muttered, his pulse spiking. One of the figures lunged, its claw-like hand swiping at him. Caleb ducked and leaped to the next platform, narrowly avoiding its grasp. The spectral figures followed, their movements unerringly silent but terrifyingly precise. The Arbiter's voice echoed again, calm and detached. "Hesitation leads to failure." Caleb gritted his teeth, adrenaline surging through him. He couldn't fight these things, not here. He had to stay ahead of them to keep moving. He leaped to another platform, then another, each one more unstable than the last. One of the figures reached the platform he had just left, and to his shock, it began to dissolve beneath it. The figure fell, its form unraveling as it plummeted into the chasm. The realization hit him like a thunderclap. The platforms weren't just reacting to him. They were reacting to any weight. If he could keep ahead of the figures, they'd destroy their own path. He pushed harder, forcing his aching body to move faster, each jump a desperate gamble. The spectral figures pursued relentlessly, their hollow eyes fixed on him, but one by one, they fell as the platforms crumbled beneath them. Finally, he reached the last platform. It was larger than the others, its runes glowing a steady, vibrant blue. The spectral figures were gone, their forms erased by the abyss, but the mist still loomed, tendrils writhing hungrily. Caleb didn't hesitate. He leaped onto the final platform, landing hard. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, with a deafening hum, the runes flared and the mist began to recede. The platform shifted, descending slowly like an elevator. Caleb sank to his knees, his chest heaving as he tried to catch his breath. But his reprieve was short-lived. The platform stopped abruptly, and the mist surged forward, coalescing into a single, towering figure. Its form was vaguely humanoid, but its features were obscured by swirling shadows and glimmering light. Its voice was deep and resonant, vibrating through Caleb's entire body. "You are unworthy," it intoned, raising an arm. Caleb scrambled to his feet, his mind racing. He had no weapons, no tools, nothing but his will to survive. "I've heard that before," he growled, his voice raw but defiant. The figure struck, its massive arms sweeping toward him with the force of a tidal wave. Caleb dove to the side, barely avoiding the impact. The platform shook violently, cracks spiderwebbing across its surface. He had to think fast. The runes. There had to be a way to use them. He scanned the platform, his eyes locking onto a pattern that seemed different from the rest. It was a circular arrangement of symbols, glowing faintly as if waiting for something. The figure struck again, and Caleb rolled to avoid it, his movements clumsy but effective. He scrambled toward the circle, his fingers brushing against the symbols. They flared brightly, and the platform trembled. The towering figure paused, its shadowy form flickering. "Come on," Caleb muttered, pressing his hand firmly against the circle. The runes erupted with light, and the figure let out a deafening roar. Its form began to unravel, the shadows dissipating into the air. The platform surged upward, carrying Caleb away from the chasm. As the light faded, he found himself back in the cell, the device releasing its grip on his head. He collapsed to the floor, his body trembling. The trials weren't over, not by a long shot, but he had survived another round. For now, that was enough. Caleb barely had time to process his survival before the chamber's walls shifted, the smooth metal folding away like liquid mercury. The oppressive room expanded into a sprawling arena, its walls towering into an infinite void. 100 alien faces, each grotesque and unfamiliar, stared down at him from seats embedded high above. Their eyes glinted with amusement, contempt, and hunger for violence. The Arbiter's voice thundered across the arena. The trial of dominion. Only the strong command. Prove yourself. Before Caleb could react, a mechanical whine filled the space, and from the ground, a series of constructs rose. Machines shaped like beasts, their limbs jointed with sleek alloys, their eyes glowing red. Each was unique in form, but united by a predatory aura. A bipedal one, bristling with jagged blades for arms, stepped forward, its heavy feet leaving scorch marks on the ground. A glowing whip materialized in Caleb's hand, the handle warm against his palm. The weapon thrummed with latent energy, and he instinctively swung it experimentally. It extended with a crack, the force vibrating through his wrist. The creatures didn't wait for him to get comfortable. The bladed construct charged first, its movement surprisingly agile for its size. Caleb sidestepped its lunge and lashed out with the whip, striking its flank. Sparks flew where the whip connected, and the creature staggered but didn't fall. Another one, this one resembling a giant scorpion, joined the fray, its tail arcing high to strike. Caleb ducked as a venomous tip sliced through the air above him. His grip on the whip tightened, and he lashed out again, aiming for the scorpion's legs. The glowing energy cut through the alloy, and the creature toppled, its body thrashing wildly. But there was no time to celebrate. The arena floor began to shift, panels rising and falling like tectonic plates. Caleb stumbled, nearly losing his footing as the bladed construct resumed its assault, joined by a wolf-like machine with razor-sharp fangs. He whipped the air in a broad arc, forcing the creatures to momentarily back off. His mind raced. This wasn't just about brute strength. The Arbiter's words echoed in his head. Only the strong command. Command! The thought clicked, and Caleb turned his attention to the scorpion construct. It was damaged but still functional, its glowing core exposed. He sprinted toward it, narrowly dodging the wolf's snapping jaws. With a leap, he landed on the scorpion's back and jammed the handle of the whip into its core. The whip's energy surged, and the construct convulsed before stilling. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, the machine's glowing eyes turned green, and its movements became unervingly smooth. It rose to its legs, no longer thrashing but poised and waiting. Caleb's breath caught. He tugged the whip, and the scorpion responded, pivoting to face the wolf and the bladed construct. "Let's see if this works," Caleb muttered. The wolf lunged, but the scorpion was faster, its tail lashing out to intercept the attack. The venomous tip struck true, piercing through the wolf's glowing core. Sparks erupted, and the creature collapsed into a heap of smoldering metal. The bladed construct hesitated for a moment, then charged with renewed aggression. Caleb gritted his teeth and directed the scorpion forward. It met the construct head-on, claws clashing against blades. The sounds of grinding metal filled the air as the two machines wrestled for dominance. Caleb seized the opportunity. While the two constructs were locked in combat, he leaped from the scorpion's back and sprinted toward the bladed one. With a powerful swing, he wrapped the whip around its neck and pulled with all his strength. The construct thrashed, its movements becoming erratic as the whip's energy disrupted its circuits. The scorpion delivered the final blow, its tail piercing through the bladed construct's core. The machine collapsed in a heap, its lights dimming. The arena fell silent, the audience above watching intently. Caleb stood amidst the wreckage, his chest heaving, the whip still clutched tightly in his hand. The scorpion construct remained at his side, its glowing eyes fixed on him like a loyal hound. The arbiter's voice returned, colder and sharper than before. Impressive, but dominion is not granted. It is earned through unrelenting trial. The floor of the arena shifted again, opening into a series of descending platforms. Caleb felt the scorpion nudge him gently, as if urging him forward. He took a deep breath and stepped onto the first platform, the scorpion following close behind. The descent was slow and eerie, the void around him growing darker with each step. As they reached the bottom, a massive door loomed ahead, its surface covered in intricate carvings that glowed faintly. Caleb didn't hesitate. He approached the door, the scorpion at his side, and pushed it open. The next chamber was unlike anything he'd seen before. It was vast and circular, its walls lined with towering, crystalline structures that pulsed with energy. In the center stood a throne, and seated upon it was a figure cloaked in shadow, its form shifting and indistinct. "You have come far," the figure said, its voice layered with an unsettling harmony. "But the path to true dominion is paved with sacrifice. Are you prepared to give everything?" Caleb's grip on the whip tightened, his gaze unwavering. "I didn't come this far to back down now." The figure rose from the throne, its shadowy form towering over him. "Then prove it." The shadowy figure stepped down from the throne, its movements fluid and unerringly precise, like smoke given form. The chamber's crystalline walls pulsed with a rhythmic hum, and Caleb felt the energy pressing down on him, like an unseen weight. The scorpion construct at his side tensed, its claws clicking softly, as if sensing the danger. "You have shown strength," the figure intoned, its voice resonating through the chamber like the tolling of a great bell. "You have commanded the lesser, but dominion over the self is the ultimate trial, and few emerge unbroken." Before Caleb could respond, the floor beneath him rippled, shifting into an inky pool that swallowed him whole. The scorpion construct let out a mechanical shriek as it was dragged into the darkness alongside him. For a moment, there was nothing but silence and weightlessness. Then, light exploded around him, and he found himself standing in a surreal landscape. The sky above was a swirling mass of colors, and the ground beneath his feet was a smooth, mirror-like surface that reflected the chaos above. The scorpion was gone. "Where am I?" Caleb muttered, his voice echoing unnaturally. The figure's voice replied, disembodied but close. "This is the trial of the self. Your final battle is not against an enemy, but against the truth you fear most." Caleb turned in a slow circle, scanning the endless expanse. A flicker of movement caught his eye, and he froze. Across the mirrored surface, another figure was approaching, tall, broad-shouldered, and unmistakably human. It was him. The other Caleb stopped a few paces away, and for a moment, they simply stared at each other. The reflection was perfect, down to the smallest detail. But the expression on the other Caleb's face was cold and detached, a stark contrast to the storm of emotions brewing inside him. "You don't belong here," the other Caleb said, his voice laced with disdain. "Excuse me?" Caleb shot back, his fist clenching. "You're a fraud," the reflection continued, stepping closer. "You survived this far on sheer luck and brute force. But deep down, you know you don't have what it takes to finish this." Caleb felt a surge of anger, but beneath it was a gnawing seed of doubt. "You don't know anything about me," he said through gritted teeth. The reflection smirked. "Don't I? I know you're afraid. Afraid of failing. Afraid of being exposed as weak. You think surviving these trials means something? It doesn't. You're just another disposable pawn in their game." "Shut up," Caleb growled, his pulse pounding in his ears. The reflection's smirk widened. "Face it, you've spent your whole life running from who you really are, always pretending to be stronger, smarter, better than you are. But here, there's no one left to fool. It's just you and me, and I'm not impressed." The words cut deeper than Caleb wanted to admit. The reflection wasn't just taunting him. It was voicing the doubts he'd buried for years, the fears he never dared confront. But this wasn't the time to crumble. Not now. "You're right about one thing," Caleb said, forcing steel into his voice. "I am afraid, but fear doesn't make me weak. It makes me human, and it's not going to stop me." The reflection's expression darkened, the smirk replaced by a scowl. "Bold words. Let's see if you can back them up." The other Caleb lunged, faster than any enemy Caleb had faced so far. His reflection's movements were a mirror of his own, sharp, calculated, and relentless. Caleb barely managed to dodge the first strike, his instincts taking over as he blocked and countered. Every move he made, the reflection matched. Every weakness he tried to exploit, it anticipated. It was like fighting his shadow, only this shadow fought back with the same ferocity he brought to every battle. The mirrored surface beneath them rippled with each blow, the chaotic sky above intensifying as their struggle escalated. Caleb's breath came in ragged gasps, his muscles screaming in protest. "You can't beat me," the reflection taunted, its voice echoing like 1,000 whispers. "I am you. Every weakness, every flaw, every failure. You can't escape them." Caleb stumbled, his reflection pressing the advantage. The words burrowed into his mind, threatening to unravel him. But as he fell to one knee, something clicked. "You're right," he said, his voice hoarse but steady. The reflection paused, its expression shifting to one of confusion. "I can't beat you," Caleb continued, forcing himself to stand. "Because you're part of me. But that doesn't mean you define me." The reflection hesitated, its form flickering like a glitching hologram. "I've made mistakes. I've failed. And I've been afraid," Caleb said, his gaze unwavering. "But those things don't make me weak. They make me stronger. They've brought me this far, and they'll carry me through this, too." The reflection's form began to distort, its features blurring as if dissolving under the weight of Caleb's words. "No!" it hissed, its voice cracking. "You can't." But it was too late. The reflection shattered into shards of light, each piece dissolving into the mirrored surface. The chaotic sky above stilled, its swirling colors fading into a calm, golden glow. Caleb stood alone once more, his chest heaving. The oppressive weight in the air lifted, replaced by a profound sense of clarity. The Arbiter's voice returned, softer this time. "You have faced the self and emerged whole. Few achieve this. The path forward is yours to claim." A doorway appeared before him, its frame shimmering with golden light. Caleb stepped toward it, his step steady and unyielding. Whatever lay beyond, he was ready. The doorway led Caleb into a chamber unlike any he had encountered so far. It was vast, almost infinite, and lined with translucent walls that seemed to contain entire galaxies, their stars twinkling faintly in the dim light. At the center of the room was a colossal platform, circular and smooth, suspended over a void that shimmered with shifting hues. As he stepped onto the platform, a hum of energy coursed through the air, raising the hairs on his arms. The golden light from the doorway faded behind him, replaced by an oppressive silence that pressed on his ears like a tangible weight. "You have proven your strength," the Arbiter's voice echoed, emanating from everywhere and nowhere. "You have faced the self and claimed dominion over fear. But power means nothing without purpose. What will you fight for, Caleb Bryce? What will you sacrifice for?" The question hung in the air as a massive holographic screen materialized above the platform, its surface rippling before resolving into an image that made Caleb's breath catch. It was Earth, his Earth. The planet spun serenely in the void, its blues and greens a stark contrast to the cold, alien environment he now stood in. But the peace was short-lived. The image zoomed in, revealing cities consumed by chaos. Fires raging, skies darkened by ash, and streets teeming with panicked crowds. Above it all, monstrous ships loomed, their silhouettes blotting out the sun. "Humanity teeters on the brink," the Arbiter intoned. "Your people have grown complacent, blind to their vulnerabilities. The enemy approaches, and they are unprepared. They will fall unless someone stands to protect them. Will you? Caleb stared at the image, his heart pounding. The vision shifted again, this time showing faces, his family, his friends, people he had fought for and loved. They looked up at the sky in terror as the alien invaders descended, their lives hanging by a thread. "You've manipulated me," Caleb growled, his fist clenching. "All of this, these trials, was just some sick way of testing my loyalty." "The trials reveal truth," the Arbiter replied, its tone unreadable. "Power demands responsibility. Dominion requires sacrifice. You have the strength to lead, the resilience to endure. But do you have the resolve to wield your power for others, even at great personal cost?" Caleb opened his mouth to reply, but the ground beneath him trembled. The platform shifted, rising into the air as the shimmering void below erupted with towering tendrils of energy. The holographic screen dissolved, replaced by an enormous figure that materialized on the opposite end of the platform. It was a towering mech, humanoid in form but unmistakably alien. Its surface was a sleek, black alloy that seemed to drink in the light, and its eyes glowed with a searing white intensity. The machine exuded an aura of raw power, its presence overwhelming. "This is your final trial," the Arbiter announced. "Victory here grants you dominion not only over yourself, but over the fate of your world. Fail, and all you have fought for will be lost." The mech stepped forward, its movements deliberate and calculated. A low hum resonated through the air as energy coalesced in its hands, forming a weapon, a massive blade crackling with blue fire. Caleb's heart raced. He gripped his whip tighter, its glow brightening in response. The scorpion construct was gone, and he was utterly alone. The mech attacked without warning, its blade slicing through the air with devastating speed. Caleb dove to the side, narrowly avoiding the strike. The platform beneath him groaned as the blade's energy seared into it, leaving a molten scar. He scrambled to his feet and lashed out with the whip, the energy-infused weapon striking the mech's arm. Sparks erupted from the impact, but the machine barely flinched. This wasn't like the earlier fights. The mech was faster, stronger, and far more relentless than anything he had faced before. Each strike of its blade sent shockwaves through the air, forcing Caleb to stay on the defensive. He needed a plan. The platform continued to shift, its edges now surrounded by the swirling energy of the void. Caleb darted toward one of the raised sections, using it for cover as the mech pursued him. It slashed at the structure, cleaving it in two and forcing Caleb to roll away. As he regained his footing, an idea sparked in his mind. The mech's attacks were powerful but deliberate. Its movements, though precise, followed a predictable rhythm. If he could exploit that, he might stand a chance. He baited the mech into another swing, dodging at the last second and lashing the whip toward its legs. The energy wrapped around one of its joints, and Caleb pulled with all his strength. The mech staggered, its balance momentarily disrupted. Seizing the opportunity, Caleb sprinted toward its exposed back. He leaped onto the machine, clambering up its sleek surface as it thrashed in an attempt to shake him off. Reaching its shoulders, he slammed the whip's handle into a glowing node at the base of its neck. The mech froze for a split second, its systems faltering. But instead of collapsing, it roared back to life, its movements more erratic and aggressive than before. Caleb barely managed to hold on as it spun wildly, its blades slashing at the air. "You adapt quickly," the Arbiter's voice remarked, almost approving. "But adaptability alone will not save you." Caleb gritted his teeth, ignoring the taunt. He needed to disable the mech completely, and the glowing node seemed like the key. Clinging to the machine's back with one hand, he used the whip to lash at the node repeatedly. Each strike sent shocks through the mech's body, its movements growing increasingly unstable. Finally, with a deafening crack, the node shattered. The mech let out a distorted screech as its systems overloaded, sparks flying from its joints. Caleb leaped clear just as the machine collapsed to its knees, its blade clattering to the ground. The platform steadied, and the Arbiter's voice returned, calm and resolute. You have passed the final trial. Your dominion is earned. The void around him shifted, solidifying into a new environment. Caleb found himself standing on a high cliff, overlooking an earth untouched by chaos. The sky was clear, the air crisp, but the Arbiter's final words echoed in his mind. Will you wield your power for others, or will you let the coming storm consume them all? The choice was his to make. The cliff beneath Caleb's feet disintegrated without warning, and he plunged into a vast expanse of blinding white light. For a moment, he was weightless, untethered from everything: the trials, the Arbiter's voice, the weight of his choices. Then, with a jarring abruptness, he landed on solid ground, the impact rattling through his bones. When he opened his eyes, he was no longer in the alien environment of the trials. Instead, he stood in a familiar place, the small backyard of his childhood home. The air smelled of freshly cut grass and summer rain, a gentle breeze rustling the leaves of the towering oak tree in the corner. But something was wrong. The world around him shimmered like a heat mirage, the edges of the house and trees blurring and shifting. Voices drifted through the air, faint and disjointed, like echoes from a distant memory. He turned toward the source of the sound and froze. In the middle of the yard stood his mother. She was as he remembered her. Warm eyes, soft features, her hands busy tending to a row of flowers. But she wasn't alone. Beside her stood Caleb as a child, no older than 10, holding a toy spaceship in one hand and pointing excitedly at the sky with the other. The sight hit him like a punch to the gut. This memory, it was real. He'd lived it. He remembered that summer day, the stories his mother had told him about distant stars and the endless possibilities of the universe. It was the day that had sparked his fascination with the unknown, the day he promised himself he would explore the stars no matter what. "You've come far," a voice said, breaking the spell of the moment. Caleb spun around to find the Arbiter standing behind him. But this time, the figure was no longer a shadowy entity. It had taken on a human form, a tall man with sharp features and piercing eyes, dressed in a simple, unassuming suit. "Why are you showing me this?" Caleb demanded, his voice tinged with anger. The Arbiter gestured toward the scene before them, where his younger self now ran in circles, his laughter ringing out like a melody. "This is the source of your strength," it said. "Your memories, your humanity. Everything you fought for stems from moments like these. But humanity is fragile. Its strength lies not in its power, but in its connection, its ability to dream, to create, to hope." Caleb's jaw tightened. "And you think I can save it? You think I can stop what's coming?" The Arbiter's gaze bore into him, its intensity unwavering. "You have faced trials that would break most. You have confronted your deepest fears, fought enemies beyond comprehension, and emerged stronger. But strength alone will not be enough. To save your world, you must become more than a warrior. You must become a leader." The ground beneath them shifted, and the backyard dissolved into a battlefield. Caleb stood amidst ruins, the air thick with smoke and ash. Alien ships hovered overhead, their weapons carving fiery paths of destruction through the city below. He staggered back, his heart racing. This wasn't just a vision. He could feel the heat of the flames, hear the screams of the people fleeing for their lives. And in the distance, he saw himself again. But this time, it wasn't the wide-eyed boy with a toy spaceship. It was the man he had become, standing defiant against the chaos, a weapon in his hand and an army of survivors rallying behind him. "This is what awaits," the Arbiter said. "The invaders will come, relentless and merciless. Your people will look to you for hope, for strength. Will you rise to meet them, or will you let your world fall?" Caleb's hands clenched into fists as he watched the vision play out. The future version of himself fought with a ferocity that mirrored his own battles in the arena, but it was clear he wasn't fighting alone. He moved in unison with the others, his leadership giving them purpose and direction. For the first time, Caleb understood what the Arbiter had been preparing him for. The trials weren't just about survival or strength. They were about transformation, about becoming the person he needed to be to face what was coming. "I'll fight," Caleb said, his voice steady and resolute. "I'll lead. Whatever it takes, I'll protect my people." The Arbiter nodded, a faint smile touching its lips. "Then your final lesson is complete." The battlefield dissolved into a swirling vortex of light, and Caleb found himself back on the platform where it all began. The colossal mech was gone, replaced by a single, small object resting on a pedestal. It was a crystal, no larger than his palm, pulsing with a soft, inner glow. "This is the heart of Dominion," the Arbiter said. "It is the culmination of your journey, the power to unite and to lead. Use it wisely, Caleb Bryce. The fate of your world depends on it." Caleb reached out and took the crystal, its warmth spreading through his hand and into his chest. For a brief moment, he felt an overwhelming surge of energy, as if the strength of every trial, every victory, every lesson had been distilled into this single moment. When he opened his eyes, the Arbiter was gone. The platform had vanished, replaced by a familiar sight, Earth, spinning peacefully in the void of space. But Caleb knew it wouldn't stay peaceful for long. With the heart of Dominion in his grasp, he turned toward the planet, ready to face the storm that awaited. Whatever came next, he wouldn't face it as the man he once was. He was ready. Caleb stood in the cockpit of the starship, the heart of Dominion secured in a chamber at the core of the vessel. Through the wide viewport, Earth loomed ahead, its serene beauty a stark contrast to the storm he knew was coming. The lights of bustling cities twinkled like constellations, a testament to humanity's resilience, its fragility, and its potential. The Arbiter's voice echoed faintly in his memory, its final words still reverberating in his mind. "The fate of your world depends on it." Caleb tightened his grip on the console, his resolve hardening. Suddenly, the warning systems blared to life. A fleet of alien warships emerged from hyperspace, their dark silhouettes cutting across the void like jagged blades. The invaders wasted no time, their formation spreading like an ominous net around the planet. The lead ship, a behemoth of shadowy metal and pulsating energy, moved to the forefront, dwarfing all the others. A hologram flickered to life in the center of the cockpit. It displayed a transmission from the alien fleet, and when the figure appeared, Caleb's blood ran cold. The alien commander was tall and imposing, its armor shimmering with an iridescent sheen. Its eyes glowed a piercing green, its expression one of utter disdain. "Earth's champion," the alien said, its voice deep and grating. "We have watched your struggles in the arena, a futile display of pride. Surrender the heart of Dominion, and we may grant your species the mercy of servitude. Resist, and your people will burn." Caleb stared at the hologram, his jaw set in defiance. He leaned forward, pressing a button on the console to respond. "You came to the wrong planet," he said. "If you think we're going to bow, you don't understand humanity at all." The alien commander's laughter echoed through the cockpit, but Caleb was already moving. He activated the heart of Dominion, its radiant energy coursing through the ship. The vessel thrummed with newfound power, its systems integrating with the crystal's essence. Caleb felt the connection immediately. The heart didn't just enhance the ship, it extended to him, amplifying his thoughts, his instincts, his very will. He became the center of a vast, intricate network that spanned the globe, linking the remaining defense systems, satellite networks, and even the people. Every fighter, every leader, every individual on Earth felt a spark of unity, a collective strength they hadn't known before. Caleb's voice reached them, not as a command but as a call to arms. "Listen to me," he said, his words resonating in minds and hearts. "This is our fight. Not mine, not yours, ours. They think we're weak because we're divided. Let's show them what happens when humanity stands together." The response was immediate. Across the planet, people mobilized. Ground forces prepared their defenses. Pilots scrambled into their fighters, and civilians fortified shelters and organized resistance groups. For the first time, humanity was united, not by fear but by hope. The alien fleet launched its assault. Massive energy beams rained down toward Earth, but Caleb was ready. The heart of Dominion allowed him to anticipate their moves, directing Earth's defense systems to intercept. Orbital cannons fired precision blasts, disabling the first wave of enemy ships. Fighter squadrons engaged the alien drones, their maneuvers impossibly coordinated under Caleb's guidance. But the lead ship was a different beast. Its weapons pierced through the defenses, its shields impervious to Earth's counterattacks. Caleb knew it was only a matter of time before it reached the surface. He pushed the heart of Dominion to its limits, directing his ship into the heart of the enemy fleet. The vessel moved like an extension of his body, weaving through enemy fire and unleashing devastating counterstrikes. But as powerful as the heart was, it couldn't do everything. The lead ship fired a massive energy blast, a weapon of unimaginable destruction aimed directly at Earth. Caleb's heart clenched as he realized he couldn't intercept it. Not from his position, but then he felt it. A surge of energy, not from the heart, but from the people of Earth. Their voices, their determination, their unyielding spirit poured into him through the network he had forged. "We've got your back," a pilot's voice came through the comms. "Just tell us what to do." Caleb's mind raced, formulating a plan. "Target their weapon systems," he ordered. "Focus everything you've got on that blast. I'll handle the rest." The Earth's forces responded in perfect harmony, their combined firepower striking the energy beam mid-flight. The explosion lit up the void, a dazzling display of light and force. Caleb used the distraction to maneuver his ship directly toward the lead vessel, his ship's systems glowing brighter as he channeled the heart's full power. As he closed in, the alien commander appeared on the hologram once more, its expression twisted in rage. "You cannot win," it snarled. "Your species is nothing but insects beneath our feet." Caleb grinned. "You forgot one thing," he said. "Insects bite back." He drove the ship into the lead vessel's core, the heart of Dominion surging with blinding energy. The collision triggered a cascade of explosions, consuming the alien ship in a massive fireball. The shockwave rippled through the enemy fleet, disabling their systems and leaving them vulnerable. Earth's forces seized the moment, delivering a decisive counterattack that routed the invaders. The remaining ships fled, their formation shattered. In the aftermath, Caleb's ship drifted silently, its hull battered but intact. He gazed out at Earth, his chest heaving with exhaustion and relief. The heart of Dominion dimmed, its work complete, but its warmth lingered within him. A voice crackled over the comms. "We did it," one of the pilots said, her voice filled with awe. "We actually did it." Caleb smiled, his grip on the console relaxing. "No," he said. "We did it together." As the ship returned to Earth, the sun began to rise, casting its golden light over the planet. For the first time in a long time, Caleb felt a profound sense of peace. The storm had passed, but the journey was far from over. Humanity had faced its greatest trial and emerged stronger, united by a shared purpose and an unshakable hope. Caleb closed his eyes, the warmth of the heart still pulsing faintly in his chest. Whatever challenges lay ahead, he knew they would face them together.